Like there's no, we got like a number of notes. Spray can, paint. Was that a paint can?
Yeah, it looks like we lost a spray can.
Which we saw like painted things that like saying surprise and stuff was all in, and the spray paint in the well.
The well area. Yep. So we missed a lore note.
We missed.
And whatever this is.
Orb.
Orb.
We did a pretty good job.
Other than that, though, we got everything else. So we missed 3. I don't hate it.
No.
This definitely seems like a spray paint can that would talk about like the like you said, probably in the labyrinth since there was spray paint in the labyrinth.
Yeah, who left the note? Like, I love box.
And then one lore note. And then collectible number 1, metal. Big old circle.
Metal.
I don't know.
No.
Interesting. There you go. These clues might help you uncover something about the story, or not. Who knows? It's the large ball. Bunny Graveyard, really solid. Thank you guys for the recommendation on this one. This is one that showed up in the subreddit, and this is very attractive. This was cool. This was really, really cool.
This was fantastic.
So I look forward to more of this. I don't know when it's gonna drop, how long this was in development. Again, went into this knowing completely nothing, but I am so on board with what they have in store. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Tom, for joining me on the couch for this little adventure.
Thank you for having me. This is a
Anytime,
delight.
sir. Thanks for flying across the pond to show me my little floating hand friend. And you guys, as always, remember, we'll be back for more GT Live, not live, soon. So keep an eye out, and in the meantime, remember, it wasn't a live stream, but it was a video for you. See ya!
In Security Breach, there's one collectible that stands out from the rest. Fredbear's signature.
Yeah!
I actually really liked how Matt had interpreted this poster in his timeline videos. This poster is obviously...
John, man, excellent taste. FNAF John, superb taste. Hey guys, and welcome to GT Not Live, where today we're apparently beefing it. Where's the beef? Ash has got the beef, apparently. Do you have beef with someone? So Ash walking, the reason I bring this up, today we're reacting to FNAF John, who has apparently solved Five Nights at Freddy's. Shocking all of us, let's be honest. Every video just has to solve all of Five Nights at Freddy's. So apparently John has a new theory that we have to react to here that has solved everything. There are, according to the title, the lost FNAF characters. Oh, sorry, they change everything. They don't solve everything, they change everything. So throw it all out. We're going back into something else. But before we get into that, I do got to find out about this beef, right? Yeah. So Ash came in and is like, beefed it. So what is the beef?
So I was like, oh man, it's time to record some GT Live. And to get to GT Live, I now have to go up like 3 to 4 flights of stairs.
Yeah, that is the theorist approved health plan right there. People requested a gym membership and we're like, got these stairs and heavy equipment for it. That's not true. But it could be true.
It could be.
That is what I'm living with right there. That's it.
Oh yeah, I mean my cardiovascular endurance has improved significantly.
It's true. We're gonna do some jumping jacks before you enter. Like, we're gonna actually gate that door that you have to go into right there by doing like 5 push-ups and 5 jumping jacks.
Ooh.
And we'll slowly crank it up.
Yeah. Or you have to like run and long jump over the gate to get into the studio.
Great, bit by bit. It's gonna be an obstacle course to get to the point where we film these at this point.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Bit by bit, piece by piece. It'll be like an ROTC like training camp. Gonna have you like crawling under some ropes, which always looked really fun to me whenever I would watch those military training like obstacle courses, like crawling under ropes. And then I'm like, but you're just, how hard is crawling under ropes? Climbing walls, now that's my thing. All about climbing.
Ooh.
Climbing a rope wall and then jumping down on the other. That's awesome. Legit. So anyway, beefing it.
Yeah. I was really excited, but I wasn't caffeinated, and I was holding my coffee.
Okay.
And I was ready to go.
So the caffeine was there. It was ready.
It was ready, but it was not inside.
Oof. Yeah.
So I was like, woo, and I get up 2 stairs, and then I get a little woozy, and then I
Two
I fell
stairs.
over.
That second stair really does the end.
It does.
Wow! I have raised myself a couple of inches this morning. I'm done.
Look, my cardiovascular endurance has improved significantly.
You're-
We're up to 2
Step
stairs
number
now.
2, baby. It's the theorist 10-step process, and you're on step number 2.
10-step plan.
Yeah, the 10-step plan.
Right.
Step number 2, beefing it.
Beefing it, yeah. That
Yeah.
beefed it pretty hard.
And so the coffee just exploded everywhere.
No, it didn't explode. I was really careful.
Nice.
But it definitely like spilled, and I definitely got some marks on my elbow.
I am sorry to hear that.
okay.
I have some spray and wash downstairs if you need it.
No, it's all good.
No, like a little Tide pen.
Oh, ugh. How?
What?
Oh, no, I meant like ouchie on my elbow. Not like,
I thought that was a response to the Tide pen. Apparently Gen Z's got something against Tide pens.
no, I was like,
Excuse me, those stains are natural. They're part of they're part of the ambiance. Okay?
I was like, why
Those
would I-
stains have feelings. Don't you remove them from the clothes.
They're not stains, they're beauty marks.
It's natural and beautiful for my coffee stains to be here.
It's a sign that I've lived.
That's amazing. Wow. Okay, so your elbow
Yes.
is the thing that you're responding to, not the coffee stains.
Yeah,
or the Tide pen.
I heard it. I smacked it right against some like wooden stairs, and it hurt. It's like, why on earth would I rub Tide?
I was gonna say after the pod incident, you guys have just gone the complete other way. You're either eating them or you're not. There's no in between.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm on a Tide-free diet.
Good. I feel like we all need to be. I feel like that behooves us all. Hey, John FNAF. John FNAF. Thank you for solving FNAF for us. Don't solve it too quickly though, because if you do, you might have to change your channel name. So this theory came out 9 days ago, so we're getting to it relatively soon. Not bad.
Yeah.
9 days? That's like, a month and a half into internet time.
Yeah.
It's all right.
Sure.
I was traveling. I was in Chicago for a couple days, so I missed it. So this is exciting. We also have a FNAF theory of our own coming up about how you don't like my FNAF theories, or how you don't like any FNAF theories. Not you specifically, but like the internet as a whole. So that one's gonna be coming up on Game Theory this weekend, coming up soon. So pay attention to that one. I think that one's gonna be fun. I think that one's important for the general landscape of the FNAF ecosystem and kind of how people are theorizing right now. And it's more of a meta look at the landscape and how angry people are about theorizing at this point. So that's one that's coming up. And in fact, if you want to help out with that one, we're still doing our final collection of data. We talked about this in this weekend's Game Theory, but we have a survey going on right now where we're asking everyone to kind of like fill out the Myers-Briggs personality test. We're asking a couple demographic questions. We're asking a couple other like IP questions, just to get a sense of where your interests are, what episodes you want to see coming up, and what your personality type is, and all of that is going to funnel into this theory that's coming up this weekend. The data so far has been lining up kind of the way that I expected it to, which is great, but I'm doing my final analysis tomorrow, just in case I need to do any final polishes to that one. So if link is down in the description, that's a thing, you know where to click. So check that one out, because your data is very helpful. Thank you for that. One thing here's something to react to. This right here, terrifying. That right there is terrifying. That's another theory coming up in, I don't know, we'll see. We have this meta theory on Game Theory coming up. I've been wanting to talk about this for a while, and stuff like this makes me want to talk about it more. No, your YouTube is definitely different from what it was, and that has big ramifications for a lot of things. And I think that's something that needs to be talked about in a meta sense. Maybe I'll do that a week or two after the FNAF episode, because it's another sit down on the couch kind of talk time. I think it's good because it talks about the influence of platform design on people's engagement with YouTube, TikTok, Shorts, whatever. I think it's stuff that people don't talk about. The reason I was in Chicago was one, family vacation, but two, we were consulting Google on stuff that they don't think about, like certain teams at Google were like, hey, here's creator perspective, here's in our experience of looking at data and this and that, here's how certain design decisions affect your platform. And so maybe doing a live consulting session with them would be good, but it has to do with stuff like this. Anyway, Dorks, dark days ahead. Anyway, lost FNAF characters that change everything. Let's go, John FNAF. Has he gotten to the point where I feel like I should be able to call him John, but if I just say John, do you guys know at this point, do I have to contextualize John FNAF?
I think it's funny that you say John FNAF, not John FUNAF.
Well, FUNAF. That's
Pull up the channel name.
I know it's
Pull up the
FUNAF.
channel name.
I know the channel. FUNAF. John FNAF. It's too, I'm sure it's the abbreviation of his name. Here, let's actually start it. It contains flashing lights. Viewer discretion is advised. I appreciate that. Oh, wow, hold up. What? This is already interesting. That is a great model, holy cow. What channel am I watching right now?
John's.
Yep, it is. Wait, which John? FUNAF John? Yeah. Oh, wow, this is great. John went hard, apparently. John's like, I learned Blender and I'm gonna show it off, or I found an editor who knows Blender, or something, man. I went on Fiverr and found someone to do this. This is great. What? It's so cool. Oh, legit. This is a very different cry from the like, let me grab an emoji PNG, not cut out the edges, and just slap it on a couple of things and keyframe it around. Very different. That's a very dramatic opening. I love this. This is exciting. Here we go.
Throughout the years, it's become clear that Five Nights at Freddy's was never supposed to end. Game after game, Scott Cawthon couldn't help but tease that the story wasn't over, despite us believing that each game would be the last.
Right? People give theorists, I will say this, people give theorists a hard time about like, oh, they're always solving it, or oh, it's the final thing, or whatever. Look at what franchise. We're just taking the cues from the franchise itself, right? Like when someone tells us it's the final chapter, we believe them, then it's not. And then Scott's just taken that cue from like the Jason Voorheeses of the world and the Nightmares on Elm Streets of the world, right? Where it's like, oh, it's the final chapter of Friday the 13th. It's not. There's like 10 other ones, or they reboot it or whatever. That's a theory right there. Right? Scott learning from the horror franchise and then rebooting it after 3 or 4. There it is.
But then Pizzeria Simulator and Ultimate Custom Night came along, and that actually was the end, at least for Scott's games. But that doesn't mean that those last 2 games didn't tease that the story wasn't over. I think they did, whether Scott intended them to at the time or not.
I understand the words that you're saying, but this is like one of those times where I'm like, Wario's 10 feet tall. And it's like, yeah, the words make sense in a sentence, and the dad is like, oh, I understand the concept of Wario being 10 feet tall, but you don't stop and actually think about what you're actually saying, and it's like, oh no, a human being would not be 10 feet tall, that's crazy. This is one of those where it's like, Scott was teasing that the franchise wasn't ending, whether he intended it or not. And it's like, well, no, you can't really tease something as an ending without you not intending it, you know? Like, you can retroactively do that, but to say, like, he was doing this without actually realizing he was doing it, disagree. So, I hear what you're saying, and I think I know what you're going for, but it is one of the, it was over, right?
I believe Scott...
And then you just basically you're backfilling. It's the retcon thing. It's the retcon thing that everyone keeps talking about in this franchise, where Scott at one point said, I've only retconned things once. And then he put out that Reddit post and people were like, he's only retconned things once. And since then, he's like, oh, I'm gonna do all this other stuff.
Scott has been dropping hints about where the current story is going for years now. This theory is a wild one, and I promise you don't want to miss it.
So get me on the hook for that watch time.
Started.
I like that every single one, too, he starts with, this is a wild one, get ready. That's the disclaimer. There's a court-mandated disclaimer in every single FNAF theory that you will ever watch. It's like, this one's gonna be controversial, or this is a wild one, or you're gonna hate me, but get ready. Strap in, friendos.
Because of the way FNAF gained popularity, Scott has had to tell the story of FNAF backwards. He didn't know that FNAF 1 would be as popular as it was, and he definitely didn't have a story planned out.
You know, I did not have the entire story planned out. Oh, you know, some kind of mad genius that had, you know, 7 games planned out from the beginning. No, I didn't.
So we had to take the details from the first game and make them make sense in the second game. Details that he didn't think twice about when making the first FNAF game now had to make sense with the story he was crafting in the second game.
Right, which I think we all know, we all kind of understand that, right? At this point, that doesn't need to be super explained. I think one of the biggest questions I have is, at this point in the franchise, right, is with security breach, and this is one of the reasons why we're asking you to do the survey down in the description, is at this point, it seems like there's been a new wave of fans coming into the franchise with security breach, with Ruin, with this kind of new era, especially with the traction that Five Nights at Freddy's has gotten with TikTok and shorts and things like that as well. Like it's become one of these genres that people have just hopped into and might have been bubbling around, but might have missed the OG generation. And that's one of the interesting tricks of any franchise that has lasted 8 years, 9 years at this point. I mean, for game theory, right? Like I've been doing it for 12, 13 years at this point, which is crazy. But when I make references like I just did to like Wario's 10 feet tall, you're like, what, is that a thing? Or you might just be like, oh, he just said a phrase. But for those of you who've been around for 13 years, you know that that's a reference to like the first big mistake or first big kind of like weird game theory moment of like, I did the math and everything in my math is like, oh, this is right, this is right, this is right. But never actually stopped to question like, oh, does that actually make sense as a conclusion though? Or was there a better way that I could have like solved this problem? Or does realism check out against like the actual pixel math that I was doing? But you wouldn't know, right? If I cite like, oh, Link is dead, or you know, like the companion cube is people, or whatever. Like those were iconic for their time, and especially early game theory, right? But you might not be aware of those sorts of things. Those might be completely new, and that is a lost history. And so one of the things I'm wondering at this point is, to me, who's been with this franchise since the early days, it's like, oh yeah, obviously he's had to tell the story backwards because he's always backfilling in what came before, kind of. But, you know, for new fans, do you know that? People who just hopped on for a security breach?
If Scott wants a detail from the past games to mean something, he can make it mean something. And I think he's doing that right now with the circus. In my last video, I told you about all of the connections to circus and carnivals recently. There was this found in the game files of Ruin that says something cool that maybe foreshadows carnival. We've got the carnival-themed mascot costumes in Ruin. A carnival was brought up in the epilogues of the Tales books, and we've got a circus happening in the background in Fury's raid.
Yeah, Tom and I reacted to that one. If you haven't seen it, that's on the channel. It was a good theory. I think it was a really solid theory. I think he's totally right in calling out that like circus babies, like I think the whole franchise recognizes that the whole circus babies era is something that has been largely glossed over, underutilized, and because it exists in this point in the timeline that no one really can pinpoint when it was, right? It's always been, even when we were doing our final timeline, it's always existed in this like frustrating part where no one can say like, oh, it's obviously after game 2 or after game 3 or in this era. It is this nebulous concept. Maybe it's the first, you know, Elizabeth getting scooped, right? Is it the first game? Is it the first event? Is it the second event? Is it a fourth event? Like, there's a lot of things, and we know what happens, and we know how important it is, and we know a lot of the domino effects, but how it slots into that early timeline is very confusing. And I think the more and more backfilling the story has gotten in this franchise, almost the earlier and earlier sister location and like the circus and all this stuff has gotten pushed and pushed and pushed until it's almost like competing with Fredbear's Family Diner now is like one of the initial moments, which is really interesting. He calls out all these details that call out to the circus. One that he does not mention here, or it seems like when he hasn't talked about yet, is Balloon Circus, which is, if you see online or if you go to like a GameStop or anything like that, there are these little figurines, like pop figures, I think they're pop figures, that are the characters in balloon outfits, holding balloons, kind of dressed as Balloon Boy, but it's Freddy, Chica, all of them, but kind of looking more like Balloon Boy aesthetic, which again is pointing at this idea of, hey, were Fredbear or Freddy and the gang at Circus Babies? And hey, that whole BB's Balloon World, the little mini game that we play in Security Breach, Is that a reference to that early day, and were they at the circus? Yeah, the circus theme has been really strong.
That maybe foreshadows Carnival. We've got the
But that's
Carnival
an additional one to add, like, hey, there's a lot of circus stuff coming down the line.
themed mascot costumes in Ruin.
Circus themes mascots. This is an interesting one. One other thing that I'm working through the new book right now that just released late last week, and in it I start with the epilogue just because the epilogue is probably one of the more important ones. We know that there's a lot of lore there. We know there's a lot about the mimic in there, and the new epilogue talks about the costumes, these hanging costumes that he's talking about, and there's 11 of them. And it very specifically calls out there are 11 of these costumes. And you learn about the different ones that are in there. It's really noteworthy that the last two remaining, and this is not in a theory, but it probably will end up in a theory at some point. But, you know, the girl, in order to survive the mimic attacking her, she has to destroy these 11 costumes so that only one's remaining, and the one that remaining is the Jester Springlock outfit that she hopes will springlock the robot and defeat it, right? And she only gets through 9 of the costumes, right? She destroys 9 of them. The last 2 remaining are the Jester Springlock outfit and a tiger. And you know, it's a tiger, and it's an old tiger. So one tiger is carnival animal. That's interesting because you have the tigers jumping through hoops and things like that in the olden carnivals, older circuses. I mean, one of the iconic animals. Same thing with elephants. But also, I think it's interesting because that also harkens back to Tiger Rock, right? Why only the Jester and the Tiger as the last 2 suits remaining out of this story? Like, why do they call out that these are the 2 that are left? Why are these the ones that don't get destroyed when all the other ones get destroyed? It goes back to kind of our AI theory, where we're like, hey, there does seem to be some sort of weird connection here between Tiger Rock as this AI entity in the Pizzaplex and Baby. You know, is Baby and the tiger, the puppet, whatever that is, one and the same? Are they competing forces, whatever? It shows a connection there. It shows a duality. And I think, again, as you kind of symbolically read these stories and the clues that are being seeped into some of these narratives, you have that again, right? Where for some reason, the authors of these stories, and Scott, in kind of designing what these stories need to, like, what are the key beats that these stories need to accomplish, the 2 that remain, Jester for Baby, that's very clear, 1-to-1, and the tiger for some reason. Why is the tiger the one left over? And, you know, you know, you can kind of figure out what it is and track it, but those are the little pieces and those are the little threads that we're always, like, looking at and trying to connect, and as I read, I'm like, why is that detail there? There's a lot of weird stuff. There's also a story in here that's a lot about Burn Trap, I feel like. B72 talks about removing and like the robotic parts as one entity from a human being and then putting them there, and it's, all the animatronic parts are still there and they operate, but now it's connected with sinews and muscle and flesh. And it's like, that's clearly what Burn Trap was meant to be. So it seems like there might be a story in here talking a bit more about Burn Trap as well, or at least, again, in a symbolic sense. So it's a good book. It's the last book of the Tales of the Pizzaplex, so it's obviously going to be an important one. A lot of details in there. I haven't gotten to the FNAF 4 one yet. Yes, Ash.
I have an idea.
Yes.
So the B-52s made the song Love Shack.
They also made the song Rock Lobster. Less appreciated, but sure.
I appreciate it now that I know that exists.
Yeah, it's a weird one. It's unhinged.
A carnival was brought up in the epilogues of the Tales books, and we've got a circus happening in the background in Furious
Yes, there are
Rage.
circuses!
I also explained that these new games seem to be telling a similar story to the Silver Eyes trilogy.
Fair.
And where that story ends is Circus Baby's Pizza World.
It does end in that. It does end in there. Yes, that is correct. Fourth closet ends in Circus Babies.
Themed restaurant. All signs are pointing to that we're probably heading to some sort of circus in the future. And the only circus-themed place we know of in this franchise is Circus Baby's Pizza World. The only place we've ever seen Circus Babies is in the Silver Eyes trilogy. And the Silver
Not to be confused with Circus Babies Entertainment and Rentals, slightly different subsidiary offshoot. which is just the catchiest phrase ever there.
Franchise trilogy made something very clear. The theme of Circus Babies is clowns. There are clowns everywhere in this place. Clowns on the walls, people dressed up as clowns, clown animatronics. Scott obviously wanted to drill this into our heads. Keep that in mind for later. During my search for more proof regarding Circus Babies Pizza World, I immediately thought of the circus gallery in the sister location bunker.
Okay. Remind me of the different rooms here again. Yeah, there's circus control, circus gallery. Oh my gosh. Okay. Yeah, there's the Ballora gallery. It's funny to me that Ballora just has her own whole thing. Like, Ballora just gets all of it to her. There's a Funtime auditorium, which you would think, like, oh, that's where Funtime Foxy and Funtime Freddy go, and then you just got Ballora. I guess I've never really stopped to think about it. I've never considered this, and this is actually something that's interesting to me as I look at this, right? Is the idea of Ballora and Baby are looped into the Fun Times because they have a similar design and they all came out at the same era, right? But like, it's not Funtime Ballora. Well, what I'm saying though is like, there's a Funtime it's the separation of them is interesting. You have the Funtime auditorium, so that would be Funtime Freddy, Funtime Foxy. Funtime Chica, we know Funtime Chica exists, right? There's a Funtime version of all those originals. But Ballora has her own thing. Circus Baby has her own thing. It is interesting that they're not separated, right? Why does Ballora get her own gallery? You know, the thing that's always bothered me though is if this is meant to be an entertainment and rental space that exists underground and not like a repurposed pizza place, then why she have her own gallery with a stage? Like, they have a stage and stuff, so is this the repurposed restaurant, or is this an actual underground bunker? That is always kind of confusing. The design of this whole thing, notwithstanding the fact that it's also built underneath someone's house, that is also a weird. There's a lot of weird details about Circus Babies entertainment and rentals. But the one is like, is this actually like a restaurant? Like, were people going to Ballora Gallery to watch a Ballora dance? Were they going to the Funtime Auditorium to watch the Fun Times? And we're like in the. Is this like the inside out? Like, this is the exterior, and we're in the control room that goes to each of them? Or is this actually an underground bunker that was built? Like, is there a restaurant around here to the outskirts? Or is this actually a storage unit? Because the way it's built, right? I'm going to the Ballora Gallery to watch Ballora perform. I'm going to the Funtime Auditorium to watch the Fun Times do their show. And then over here, or something over here, unmapped, but does exist, is a restaurant. I don't know. I've always wondered that. There's no evidence to prove one way or the other. I will say that Fourth Closet does say that there is obviously there's actually Circus Babies restaurant. There's a whole thing, but is that? Is this underneath that, and then they come up? How are they connected, right? Mystery.
In the sister location bunker. This is the main room that Circus Baby was being held in, but based on it being called the Circus Gallery, I'm guessing there were also a bunch of things from Circus Baby's Pizza World in that room. In my last video, I told you that the Circus Gallery is connected right to Fredbear's Family Diner, and I explained why I think the FNAF 6 pizzeria is Fredbear's Family Diner.
Yeah,
I said that the alleyway...
I think that's a fair guess, and again, that's one of those things I think a lot of people have added to their personal canon because there's a lot of evidence to suggest that.
Easter eggs in FNAF 6 look just like the alleyway where Charlie was killed, and the whole point of the game is upgrading and reusing an old pizzeria. Fredbear's Family Diner was owned by Henry, so it would only make sense that he would reuse the restaurant he already owns.
Fredbear's Family Diner was owned by Henry. Do we know that? Is that for sure? Is that from the books? I mean, it was co-owned, like, Fredbear's Family Diner was owned by Henry. I know Charlie in the books, and again, this is me just, I'd have to revisit this, but I know Charlie's like, oh, that was my dad's old pizzeria. And I believe it's co-owned, like, I believe it's always referred to as co-owned by Henry and Ron. Do we ever know for sure that Henry for sure owns this one? And is it always referred to as co-owned? I would like to question that. He owns it. Not 100% sure on that one. I think that one needs to be double checked.
But that's where I left it. I had no more proof. Until I found something that's been right in front of our faces for years now. During the office gameplay of FNAF 6, if you turn everything off, you can actually hear the restaurant operating. You can literally...
Are you hearing something that I'm not, Ash? What are you hearing?
I'm hearing ominous music after everything shuts off.
Ominous music?
And a little clank.
You can literally...
Do you want to put on my
No,
headphones?
I believe, because I've listened to this before. So we're, because to me the ominous music, or like I guess that's you hearing it through the walls. I mean, this is supposed to be at night. Yeah, I guess. Okay.
Really
it's very to say like, oh, we hear the restaurant operating. Yeah, is that a surprise? Like I think it's always been the simulator, right? Like that's kind of the whole point.
the kids playing, indicating that the office gameplay area is connected directly to the restaurant.
Sure.
This is further proven by the drawings on the walls. These drawings feature characters we see in FNAF 6. We see the Rockstar animatronics and even Lefty. But there's one drawing of a character that isn't featured in FNAF 6 at all, Fredbear. Why would there be a drawing of Fredbear in this office? Well, it's because this place used to be Fredbear's.
I question that. Here's the thing about one, they're just drawings, right? From a broad spectrum. I say they're just drawings, and then the internet's like, oh, but everything has meaning, and there's no such thing as coincidences. Drawings are different from like things that are intrinsic to the space, right? It's not like it's a hard-coded poster on the wall for FNAF 6 or whatever, because there's a baby picture on the wall too, right? A spooky baby picture. I mean, look at what you just called out. You called out that there is Lefty on the wall. Lefty doesn't exist as a animatronic in this pizzeria until you bring him in through salvage on night like what, 2 or 3. So clearly this space is a collection, and this room, right, is meant to be like, oh, I see all the characters that I'm ultimately like collecting, or this kind of like back history of everything. The fact that there's a picture of Golden Freddy here, or sorry, Fredbear here, doesn't necessarily mean that like, oh, this is one in the same place, and also he used to be here. It's just, this is a smattering of like the FNAF franchise over an extended period of time.
But if this place used to be Fredbear's, like I said earlier, Fredbear's was connected directly to the circus gallery. And what if I told you that there's one more drawing in this office that doesn't belong? If you look to your right and turn up the brightness, you can see a clown poster, the one thing heavily associated with circus babies.
But again, like, we're trying to draw Circus Baby to us, right? Like, I get that she's not present in there, but also this is an employee-only location, and I don't necessarily see this as like, oh well, they are absolutely one-on-one connected. I agree. The point of the FNAF 4 location being connected to sister location through the map, 100%. I think that's undeniable. I would disagree with this point of evidence as like, oh, they must have all been in this place.
So we've got Fredbear indicating that this place used to be Fredbear's, and we've got a clown indicating that this place is directly connected to the circus gallery. But
see, that's different. Like, if you're saying, oh, this draw, you're taking the same piece of evidence, but you're making it mean two different things, if that makes sense. And I think that that's one of those tricks, right? Is a picture being here means that this animatronic has been in this location. Sure, okay, you can have that, but then to say like, oh, and the fact that Circus Baby is here, but she's over in this other building connected, it weakens it a little bit. I get the point, and I don't disagree. Let me be clear. Like, I think you are on the right track, and I think the map shows that. I think this is actually one of those points that kind of weakens it. Because also I would question then, why is it a scary? You know, why is it a scary clown when Freddy is, or a Fredbear is a normal drawing, right? Why are all the other pictures normal, but you have scary baby in there? Like, it's a very different style of art. So how would you explain that? I think would be the counter argument I would feel about that.
But are we sure that this clown represents circus babies? I mean, there is the lemonade and fruit punch clown in FNAF 6, so it could just be a creepy drawing of one of them. I needed a little more proof. And while researching, I could...
See, he calls out the lemonade and fruit punch clowns, right? And I think that right there shows you why I'm a little bit skeptical about this evidence point, is because the FNAF 6 location at this point, right, is a trap to lure in all these other animatronics. And what Henry is doing, what I would assume Henry is doing by laying out this trap, right, is because you buy the animatronics and the different things that you're putting into this pizzeria simulator, this simulated pizzeria to draw the animatronics in, what you're doing is you're buying different pieces and parts from various catalogs. You're getting them from scrap heaps, you're getting them from like old retailers of retro animatronics. So what you're doing is you're collecting a bunch of pieces and parts from the history of animatronics, both Fazbear and other. That's how you get the mediocre melodies in there. That's how you get fruit punch and stuff. And I think what you're led to believe here, and I think what we've started to figure out all these years later, is that was, you collecting almost like a history of these animatronics. So I would say Fruit Punch Guy, Fruit Punch Clown, and Lemonade are probably from Circus Babies, and they were sold off at some point because they weren't important, they weren't possessed, they weren't anything special, and so they're like, oh, we don't need these anymore in Fazbear, and now you're kind of buying them back to bring them back in. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if that's actually what's going on here, but it showcases that FNAF 6 is really this weird conglomeration of a lot of different influences from all the different restaurants across the whole series.
Could have sworn that I've seen a similar clown poster before. The first instance of a clown showing up in this franchise that I can remember was in the first real teaser we got for FNAF 6, where we see Scrap Baby in an alleyway with a clown on the wall, further solidifying the connection between clowns and circus babies. The next time we see a clown in this franchise is in Lefty's secret alleyway cutscene in FNAF 6. On the wall, we see a poster that's meant to represent the Afton family. We've got William and Michael, the crying child as a bear with sharp teeth for obvious reasons, and then a clown to represent Elizabeth, aka Circus Baby. This clown has a wide smile and is wearing green and purple pants. This clown is actually featured again in Scrap Baby's cutscene on a different poster. The same clown with the green and
this was them making a very clear connection.
Purple pants, once again being associated with Circus Baby. This same poster can be found in the Ultimate Custom Night office as well, and it seems to be advertising a circus, which is presumably Circus Baby's Pizza World. The poster features the clown, an elephant, and the words, "You don't want to miss it." There's also some other letters at the top of this poster in purple and green that I can't seem to make out.
Oh, okay. What would that be? Ha? Hat? 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 Tack. Hat? Has to be an H, right? I'm trying to, that's not really any other letter. Watch? Could be a W, like a very strangely written W. You know it's an A and a T for sure. It's not a C though, so it wouldn't be watch. Ha ha ha. I know. And then it looks like it ends with a TY. I don't know.
So if you have any idea what this says, let me know in the comments below. For years now, we've all assumed that Circus Baby's Pizza World features Circus Baby and probably the Fun Times too. But I think what these posters and the Silver Eyes trilogy were trying to tell us was that it was much more than that. Previously, I told you that the circus-themed mascot costumes we see at the end of Ruin actually showed up in the Silver Eyes trilogy first.
Yeah, that's true. They also talk about, and again, like going back to Tales of the Pizzaplex, they actively call out, like, oh, there's a blackbird, there's an elephant, they keep going back to this mushroom, and that's one of the weird ones. One of the most important suits that the Mimic keeps going back to and wearing is this mushroom, and I don't know why. And that one's weird. Like, a lot of them are very directly one for one, like, oh, the Jester is Baby, and oh, the Tiger Rock is, this Tiger Rock just plays off in a lot of different Tales of the Pizzaplex for a lot of different reasons. They say the blackbird. I believe they call out the elephant at one point. There's a big blue dog that they go back to a couple times. There's a rodent. But the one that the Mimic really is drawn to is this mushroom character, which I think is very odd. It's a very odd detail. Yeah.
I mean,
go ahead.
If you consider like how a fungus can spread, right? They kind of work in networks.
Oh, so you think it's... Oh, that's an interesting interpretation. Because this whole time, like, when they're talking about the costumes, I keep thinking about, like, oh, yeah, it's, this is one for one, this is one for one. But you're thinking the mushroom is actually more symbolic of what it does as an entity. and spreads out.
That's my thought.
That's interesting. I like that,
Thanks.
actually, because this whole time I'm like, why? It's everything in this franchise thus far is animal themed or humanoid. You know, you have either clowns or animals. That's always it, right? And so for them to call out like, oh, there is a mushroom costume, and I'm like, why would there be a plant or fungus, in this case, costume? And yeah, maybe it is more of a symbolic thing of like, oh, this is a fungus that spreads, or this is like a virus almost that spreads. That's interesting.
I mean, it's either that or he's been playing a lot of Super Mario.
He is very excited for Mario Wonder.
Yeah.
Yeah, as we all are, honestly, as we all are. Good call out, I like that.
Ice trilogy first, in that these costumes were used to foreshadow us going to Circus Baby's Pizza World in the next book. And considering we get a literal elephant costume dressed up like a clown in Ruin, just like how we get an elephant on the poster for Circus Babies,
Sure.
I can only assume that the games are headed in the same direction. And the idea that there were more than just the
Again, this went back to everyone's conclusions of that last game, which is like, hey, we're going down to Circus Baby. Like, this area is connected to Circus Babies. There's a scooper. There's all these costumes, all that stuff. I don't know if it's necessarily we're going there. I think there's a high likelihood. I wouldn't be surprised. But yeah, it does feel like we're leading more heavily into like, hey, let's figure out what sister location actually is. Like, let's dive into that part of the story so we can actually address it.
Fun times at Circus Baby's Pizza World isn't new. One of the biggest unsolved mysteries in FNAF history has to do with Night 4 of Sister Location. The suit that Baby puts us into has remained a mystery to this day. We learned that it came from Baby's old pizzeria, aka Circus Baby's Pizza World.
You're inside something that came from my old pizzeria.
It's been so hard to figure out what this is because it's unlike anything we've seen in this franchise. The suit seems to have faceplates, just like the Funtime animatronics, but it's definitely not as high-tech. The suit also seems more handmade, with the inside of it almost having a leather texture.
That is interesting. That's interesting. It is, I guess, more of a leathery texture. Yeah, I would say that. I'm trying to think if there's like a metal, but yeah, it's not really a metal that would do that. Yeah, you would have kind of like these leather and then rivets and things. That's interesting. Yeah.
It's like the
I've also always, I know that there's been a lot of analysis done on this mask, and it is important to figure out. I feel like this has always felt like a Chica beak, though. It has it has that pretty iconic shape, and her eyes kind of have that shape. That's always the kind of like working headcanon that I've worked with. But yeah,
It's like this is an older version of the Fun Times, but more handmade and more like an actual costume. Like I said, this is unlike anything we've seen in this franchise, is what I was saying until I did a little more digging. About a month before Security Breach came out, some official concept art of Scott's designs got posted online. This is the concept art. Upon first glance, these
I have not seen this. That's interesting. Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, these are by Lady Fizzy, who does the artwork for the books? I think the books, right? But that's interesting, but they are Scott Cawthon, like, they are dictated by him, right, and copyrighted by him. That's interesting, okay.
These look like mascot costume versions of Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica.
Oh, that's funny. Huh. Oh, I think I see where this is going, yeah.
But if you look closer, you can see that these aren't just costumes. These are costumes with faceplates and stomach hatchet. Look like
oh yeah, I see. Yeah.
Mascot costume versions
That's cool.
of Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica. But if you look closer, you can see that these aren't just costumes. These are costumes with faceplates and stomach hatchet.
Yeah. Oh yeah, look at that. Oh yeah, look at that. Oh, that's absolutely Chica. Look, there's the like half moon mouth, the big old eyes. Yeah, Chica has those kind of like big old eyes. Huh, that's really interesting. And the stomach actually you can climb into. What was this for? So this was just concept art? Fascinating.
Just like the Fun Times. These are literally older versions of the Fun Times.
Sure.
Just like the suit we were put
That's
into
cool.
on Night 4.
Yes,
Sister
I agree with that.
The faceplates are even placed in a similar way to the costume we see on Night 4.
Yes, absolutely.
Them
100%.
appearing on the front of the face separate from the rest of the head. But the suit on Night 4 was a spring lock suit.
I'd recommend that you keep the spring lock springlock's wound up.
Right.
Does that also mean these are Springlock suits? Well, like I said in my
Could.
last video, Charlie describes Springlock suits in the Silver Eyes trilogy by saying, I think they were costumes. Sometimes people wore them, and sometimes my father put them onto the robots. Which means that Springlock suits can be worn by humans, but also put onto endoskeletons.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, here's the thing, like, right, these are big and bulky enough that makes sense. So yes, 100%. Like, I look at that and I'm like, oh, that feels like a mascot outfit, but you could have a robot in there to, you know, things spring out and attach to its body or whatever.
And
Yeah.
if you zoom in close on the top right of this image, you can see an endoskeleton wearing the mascot costume.
Yeah.
Now, do I think
Yep.
the costume on Night 4 is one of these characters? Maybe, but probably not. I think a costume that's in this style that is more circus-themed would be a better fit.
Maybe. It literally, this is one of those reasons why I haven't focused on who is that animatronic? Like, why is, what suit is that? I think we know it's a Springlock suit, we know it came from Circus Babies, and so it connects the idea of Springlock to Circus Baby. The who actually doesn't make quite as much of a difference. If it's Chica, then yeah, maybe it does make a bit more of a difference because it means that there's a clown Chica, or Chica appeared in Circus Babies at some point. So yeah, I think that's pretty solid. There's never been enough to prove that suit is one thing or another, which is why I've kind of stayed away from it from a theorizing perspective, because it's like, it's all speculation and about the face shape and this and that. Like, yeah, you can draw some rough parallels, but outside of like, hey, that's similar to the beak shape, and oh, that's similar to the eye shape. That's about all you have to go off of. I think it's an interesting single point, but without any other evidence of like, oh, Chicas and Circus Babies is harder. But I do like, but yeah, it connects the idea of Springlocks in Babies.
Since Baby said that the costume came from her old pizzeria, which was a circus-themed place, what I think these costumes are way more important than the one on Night 4. In the story The Mimic from the Tales books, we learn about Edwin, who is a robotics genius hired by Fazbear Entertainment to turn a bunch of random mascot costumes into actual
Mushroom and
animals.
Jester. There. First off, there's the editing that I know and love out of John. Like back to the wheelhouse. Secondly, I said at the beginning of this episode that everyone is court mandated to do a disclaimer at the beginning of their episode where it's like, oh, I got a theory and it's a wild one or it's a wacky one. Other court mandated FNAF thing at this point is anytime you talk about the new books, you have to give you the backstory of Edwin. 100% requirement. Like, everyone's like, still talking about these books, can't assume that people know the backstory of Edwin, who may or may not be Henry, parallels, whatever. Gotta tell you everything about this guy again. Also, did you know he had a kid who died? Whoa! That's one of those fun factoids that we're all required to say.
Animatronics. And during the story, Scott made an effort to point out which animatronics Edwin was creating.
Yes, they
Edwin
do call
was
this out. I
turning
think this is interesting. He makes the core form, right?
the following mascot costumes into animatronics. Quote, a brown Freddy Fazbear, a bright yellow chick, a blue bunny, and a pirate fox. This is the first time we learned that the main 4 animatronics we see in the game didn't start as animatronics. They started as mascot costumes and were turned into animatronics.
Yeah, this is actually, and again, this goes back to our original timeline, where I'm like, hey, the beginning of this franchise and the beginning of Fazbear and these characters started as mascot outfits that you could wear. And if you go back to our like ultimate timeline 4-parter, right? It was a lot of speculation, but also I thought there was a decent amount of evidence to suggest this. So, you know, we were going back to like Fredbear's singing show and this and that, where it's like, how are you tracking the evolution of this franchise? And this actually supports that idea of like, they all started as just costume characters that walk around somewhere, and then bit by bit, you figure out ways to systematize it and turn it into something else, which is cool. It's a really believable evolution of technology.
And I believe that these, or something similar to these, were those mascot costumes that later got turned into the 4 main animatronics we see in the game.
Maybe not one for one, and I would challenge that transition, because that shows that it's like, oh, these are exactly the same. I think these are the animatronic versions. I think what you're calling out, John, is maybe a transitional point or a midway point, right? Where I'm a mascot out, you know, I start off as just a person putting on a mascot head and walking around the suit like a mascot in a baseball game, right? And then there's that midpoint of, well, we have a mascot suit that can also be a robot, and then maybe that's that. And then you get to this point where now they're fully automated. One of the two, right? Either they go fully automated first and then they spin lock, or vice versa. But it's an evolutionary process. I would not say that those guys in the artwork are the exact same as those, and I wouldn't do a cross transition there because I worry that sends kind of like too strong of a message of like these are the same thing.
And you probably know by now that I think Edwin is a parallel to Henry. A big reason for why I believe this is because Henry was the one who created the main 4 animatronics, not Edwin. Henry says this in FNAF 6.
The loss of innocence, the loss of everything to so many people. Small souls trapped in prisons of my making, now set to new purpose.
Yeah, right, his making.
The thing about Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy starting as mascot costumes is something I don't see talked about a lot. But what were these mascot costumes used for? There's currently no restaurant that we know of that's older than Fredbear's Family Diner. Well, I think that's because these costumes weren't being used at a restaurant. In the story The Mimic and Now in Ruin, we learn about a bunch of random mascot costumes, featuring characters we've never seen before. In the books, there's a mushroom costume, a gopher costume, a jester costume, and in the games, there's a bird and a lion. I think these costumes are trying to tell us that the story of
The bird and the lion are also in the new book. I think there's a couple others as well, but yeah, they are all, it's a weird mishmash of things.
FNAF started at a traveling carnival. This
Interesting. So, okay, sorry, that's important.
are trying to tell us that the story of FNAF started at a traveling carnival.
Yeah, I would actually, yes, I think that makes sense.
This is further backed up in the Silver Eyes trilogy. When Charlie is going through Henry's workshop after his death, she finds a book about the history of the traveling carnival and of the circus. This is something that's never explained again in the whole trilogy, but I think Scott put that in there as a hint to how the story of FNAF began.
And this actually goes pretty close to, again, going back to our first part of our timeline, our mega timeline, right? Where I'm like, let's speculate about the very, very early days of this franchise and what would have started it. This Fredbear Singing Show, right? Where we call out like it's black and white, the ticket cost is like 50 cents. They have the pie-eyed animation of like the 1930s. And so at the time, I'm like, oh, it's a local dancing bear show. Because that was, like dancing bears were a thing at that time. And that seems about right. And it seems like a sort of local attraction sort of thing. I actually like the idea of it being a traveling show. That's smart. I think it's a cool fusion of my idea and kind of the new evidence that we've gotten since the release of that timeline. So I like that. I think that's cool.
In Security Breach, there's one collectible that stands out from the rest. Fredbear's Singing Show.
Yeah!
I actually really liked how Matt Pat interpreted this poster in his timeline videos. This poster is obviously...
This is John, man. Man of excellent taste. FNAF John. Superb taste.
Very old, with it being in black and white, the ticket price only being 50 cents, the gramophone, and the pie-shaped eyes. I mean, this looks just like an old 1930s Mickey Mouse poster, with the same pie-shaped eyes and the same style of lettering. But the name of the poster doesn't sound like a restaurant, it sounds like an attraction.
It does, right, yeah, Fredbear Singing Show. It is a standalone thing, which is why I'm like, well, it has to be like either like a roadside attraction or like a one-off kind of like novelty, like the world's giant ball of yarn or whatever.
And I think this attraction was a part of the traveling carnival and was where the story of FNAF began.
I think that's really a cool interpretation, and I think it aligns with a lot of the stuff that we've seen since the release of that episode and since the release of Ruin. I think that helps a lot. I will say, and this is one of the things that because I was struggling with, like, what do we do with Fredbears? Like, how do we fit this in? Like, how do I justify? Because it was one part evidence-based, but there's a lot of gaps in the early story that, especially back then, I'm like, what evidence do we have to pull from? Music, food, and beverage. The food and beverage was the thing, and the fact that they're like, it says, our local singing bear. It was the food and beverage plus the local singing bear that got me to say it has to be a standalone thing. I didn't consider that to be traveling, but looking back on it, the reason I was really fixated on this being not a carnival show, but like a local attraction. Food and beverage, hard to really serve if you're a traveling carnival. I guess you could bring like the popcorn stands and this and that, but food beverage makes me feel like it's a restaurant, but local singing bear. That's the thing. It says that this show is specific to a specific area, right? It is the local bear. This is our thing. It is a regional thing, which is, again, if you're traveling, you can't really advertise it as like, visit our local bear. Well, if you're a traveling show, local doesn't exist because you're moving to other people's locales, right? Minor thing, again, might be one of those things that is retconned or whatever, because I do like John's interpretation here. I like that a lot. But that is the one thing I'd say that's pretty strong evidence against it.
I think what the story The Mimic was trying to tell us was that Fazbear Entertainment bought out the traveling carnival, and they started turning the mascot costumes from that carnival into animatronics for their new restaurants. The main 4 animatronics stayed together and formed Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, but the goofier costumes were reused for Circus Baby's Pizza World, a circus-themed restaurant.
I don't know. Gopher and... this is where... I like the thought process, but it feels a bit reductive of the evidence that we've been given. I think at this point in the series, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that the mediocre melodies, Ned Bear especially, are ripoffs or copies or attempts to kind of like capitalize off the success of Freddy Fazbear. But we also know that the mediocre melodies are part of the Fazbear crew at a certain point. And so that indicates to me that at some point down the line, there were copycats, maybe even, and again, like we posited in episode 1 of our kind of timeline, maybe William did one route, Henry did the other route, and then they merged together or bought each other out or something like that, paralleling what we saw with real-world animatronic franchises with Chuck E. Cheese and Funtime Pizza, Rockabilly, I forget the two frames, but basically there were two rival animatronic restaurants, and they were competing against each other, and then one eventually buys out the other, right? You had a very parallel story there. I get what you're going with the Jester, 100%. To say that there's a gopher and a mushroom as Circus Babies feels like we're trying to shoehorn evidence into places where it's like, that doesn't quite work, right? Like why that when you yourself, John, in the beginning of this episode said one thing that's been hit over the head is Circus Babies, it's clowns, humanoids, you know, but then to say mushroom and gopher feels odd.
But not all of the mascot costumes were turned into animatronics. In the epilogues of the Tales books, we learned that this is the case. A lot of these mascot costumes were being held in the FNAF 6 pizzeria. And in the epilogues of the Tales books, it's only really the goofier costumes that were left in the FNAF 6 pizzeria. Those goofier costumes were still around, and I think were reused for Circus Baby's Pizza World, and I think we were put into one of those on night 4 of Sister Location.
Yeah, his context here in the upper corner is important.
The goofier costumes
because I think this is also confusing.
Those goofier costumes were still around.
You're not gonna be able to see it.
I think were reused for Circus Baby's Pizza World, and I think we were put.
Yeah, a spring. So one of the things, I don't know if you're seeing it in the top, but one of the things that he's saying across. Oh, here I can turn it down. There you go. One of the things that he's saying in these top little asterisk editor notes. Springlock 1, not the type that we saw in Ruin. Yeah, one of the things that's confusing about the stories and the epilogues is that, like I mentioned before, there's 11 suits. Why 11? I haven't thought through it, but the number is very clear and very important, right? It's very specific. But a lot of them are not animatronics. The Jester costume is an animatronic, or is a Springlock. But all the other ones are just normal mascot outfits, right? So even though there's 11 costumes that need to be destroyed that are in this old abandoned pizzeria underground that the Mimic wants to climb into the suits, only one of them that we know of, and I don't believe any of the other ones have been specifically called out as a Springlock. So not all of them are. And I think that's one of the inconsistencies or one of the challenges here is like, hey, this idea of these suits, especially these older suits, which were Springlock, which weren't, were they all Springlocks? It's confusing.
Into one of those on night 4 of Sister Location. I've suspected for a while now that Circus Baby is a